Venezuela has the biggest reserves of oil in the entire world. And because our economy focus on only oil production, okay, and there's also a lot of corruption, none of that money ever made it into a Venezuelan's pocket. So when we talk about food, it was very common for me to go to a grocery store in Venezuela and see small children begging us to buy them food. And then, whenever I was meeting Venezuelans who moved to the US about 2015 or so, I was hearing the minimum wage is like less than $1. And for you to have the basic food basket, you need about $500 a month to actually feed yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. I'm your host, Arely Gutierrez, a Latina registered dietitian, and I'm here to explore how cultural inclusivity can transform our approach to food, health, and well-being. Each episode aims to empower you to better understand and serve diverse communities with practical insights, personal stories, and expert advice. If you find this podcast valuable, don't forget to hit that follow button, leave us a review, and share it on your socials. You can find us as at Food Culture Curious. Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. My name is Arely. I'm a registered dietitian on a mission to promote cultural inclusion in the nutrition space. Today we have with us Gabby Puche. She is a nutrition counselor at Husk, helping clients build sustainable, culturally grounded habits for metabolic health. She also volunteers on the Public Policy Committee with Oakland A&D, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, advocating for evidence-based nutrition policy and community health. Welcome, Gabby.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm just so honored to be here, Adeli.
Oh, I love to have you. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. For those of you that I don't know, me and Gabby have gone to conferences together, and she's a really fun roommate. So, of course, I wanted to have you on.
Lahidan, and for those of you that don't know what Lahidan is, it is Latinos and Hispanics in dietetics and nutrition. And Areli and I volunteer there. We just want to make the academy the best place for not only Latino and Hispanic registered dietitians, but also the populations that we serve. And we both bond over that a lot.
Yeah. Hopefully, today's episode will be helpful for whoever is listening to learn a little bit more about the Venezuelan food culture and health implications with everything that's going on. So, we'll jump right into it. Tell me a little bit about your own personal traditional foods growing up.
Growing up, believe it or not, I was actually a really picky eater. What? The picky eater became a dietitian. I was a very picky eater, and my mom was so worried about me being a picky eater that she will always say, take me to the pediatrician, have her weigh me and measure me quite a bit, look at my hair. Is her hair brittle? It's like that. My mom was the mom that gave me all the vitamins and all of the aceite de bacalao, which is the Spanish way to say fish oil, because I was such a picky eater. Honestly, growing up in Maracaibo, Venezuela, my favorite foods were like tequeños, which is like a fried dough finger with
Mm.
mozzarella inside. That's very common in Venezuelan parties, like birthday parties. I grew up eating a lot of spaghetti. And actually, when I was growing up, the main cook in my household was actually my dad. My mom didn't really cook very much. And so that was my experience in Venezuela. And so in 2005, my parents were already divorced, and my mom decided to make the voyage to move us to the United States. At the time, I was 10. And of course, as an immigrant, she was just super busy working multiple jobs. And as the eldest daughter, I actually became the primary cook in the household. It was like back in the day whenever we would have a map quest and things like that.
Yeah.
And so what my mom would do would just she'd find recipes on Yahoo and she would print them out and leave them for me on the counter. And then whenever I would get home from school, because I was in middle school, I would actually cook dinner for the family. And I
Mhm.
would cook very simple things like arroz con pollo, arroz con albóndigas, like plátano con queso, very cultural and very simple because for one, I was a kid, and second, my brother and sister were also very picky.
So it had to be foods that were familiar and comfortable and easy.
Yeah. Luckily, at the time, my mom, brother, and sister and I lived in Florida,
Mm.
lived in the Orlando area, which as it's deeply Latino and there's a lot of Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, so it was very easy for us to find those foods. Later on, we actually ended up moving to the Dallas, Texas area, and that Latino community shifted. And it was more Central American, so it was harder for us to find Latino. But one of my happiest memories was just eating spaghetti with a Venezuelan style bolognese sauce back home in Maracaibo.
Yeah. Those traditions always mean so much to us, those food memories, right? That always reminds me of that scene in Ratatouille where the food critic just thinking about his mom's food and how moving that is.
It was very moving.
So, in learning a little bit about Venezuelan food culture, I like to go through as if we were looking at my plate, right? What would you say are some staples as far as proteins? What do you feel is common?
So it depends on the region of Venezuela. So just like the US has its different regions, Venezuela has its different regions. I grew up in the West. We will call that Occidente. So on the part that was actually closer to Colombia. But then we also have the Andes, we have Los Llanos, which is the plains, and then we also have the Caribbean part and the Oriente, which is the east. So it depends. If you come from Isla Margarita and things like that, you might be eating different from Caracas or Maracaibo. Going back to the proteins, I would say beef is an enormous commodity and it's an enormous I would say that when we're talking about protein, beef is the thing in Venezuela. And then I would say then fish, but I would say mostly beef. Like whenever we talk about the Venezuelan plate, I think of carne mechada, which is shredded beef. And whenever we talk about eating arepas, if you're not eating arepas with pollo, you're eating arepas with carne. Whenever you're eating our Venezuelan lasagna, which is pasticho, you have it with beef. I would also say ham, so pork would be another protein. Pan de jamón is a Christmas thing in which you put ham with raisins inside bread. And I know it sounds weird with a sweet and savory combination. It's actually really good. So I would say more of that red meat would be the protein of choice for most Venezuelans, and then fish.
Okay.
And of course, whenever we're counseling Venezuelans, I'm just like, can you go more towards the fish, the chicken, more of that? If you're gonna have red meat, can we focus on the leaner cuts? I try to be very aware that red meat is the thing in Venezuela or amongst Venezuelans.
Yeah, and that's I think some people automatically want to cut out red meat whenever they're talking about eating healthier. But like you said, sometimes it's what cut of the meat are you having a leaner cut? So that you can definitely work with that. And I love how you're bringing that advice, that cultural inclusion to your patients. And they're so lucky to work with you. Okay, perfect. And you can't talk about Venezuela without talking about arepas. So for people who don't know what that is, can you just describe, and I know it plays a big role in Venezuelan food culture. Can you just describe a little bit what it's made of, what it is when you see it?
When I think of food democracy, I know I just made that up, food democracy, I think of arepas. So arepas are eaten by rich, poor, middle class, and that does not really exist in Venezuela, honestly, but everyone in Venezuela eats arepas. It's almost like a corn sandwich, right? You can fry it, you can bake it, you can pan fry it, and it's basically milled corn. And they're very similar to Colombian arepas. They also have arepas, right? But the difference is that the Colombian arepas, and hey, Colombians, don't come after me. Don't come after me. You guys' are small, and small arepas. Typically, they're made with cheese inside. Ours are big, and we have an array of different fillings. And so When I think of a side dish, I think of Colombian arepas or a small portion, I think of Colombian arepas. But when I actually think of a meal, I think of Venezuelan arepas. They can get pretty gnarly. They can look so enormous. You're like, whoa, how am I supposed to bite this? How am I supposed to bite on this thing? And the thing is, because it's corn, milled corn, it's very easy to make. It's just water, salt, that's it. And you just roll up the dough. It's just very cheap to make in for the masses. And so you've got to have an arepa. And if you're gonna make arepas, you're gonna be pleasantly surprised that it's a very cheap type of masa.
Wonderful. So let's round out the plate, right? We talked about the major proteins, major starches, so milled corn, it sounds like. And then tequeños are made from, is that a bread
Dough,
flour? Dough? Okay.
some bread flour.
And
Yeah.
then for produce, you mentioned plátanos. Is there any other major staples as far as fruits or veggies?
So I would say that geographically speaking, I would say that Venezuela is more Caribbean. So think of all the Caribbean fruits like mango, papaya, bananas. And when I think of produce, I think of we have a lot of peppers like ají dulce, things like that. We have a lot of pepper, cilantro. I think of the starches though. I think of
Mhm.
the starches. And I think about the indigenous people that lived in what is now Venezuela before Spanish colonization. And they had cassava, they had yuca, and then they also had corn. And those starches are so important in our culture. Sancocho, which is a type of soup, right? Just so many dishes have got to have yuca, cassava, or plata and also corn. So that's what I think about vegetables. And of course, there's this carb phobia in our culture. And then they move to the US and they're like, oh, I shouldn't be eating these foods. And then we have to get into the conversation about simple carbohydrates and then complex carbohydrates and portions. And is it fried? Is it boiled? Is it baked? It is healthy, it has fiber, micronutrients like minerals and all of the things and all the nuances that we know, right? And I wish that people were not so afraid of them.
I was watching a rerun of Schitt's Creek. I don't know if you ever saw that show. And
I
they
haven't,
were
but tell me about it.
in the scene. They had a fitness instructor and he was talking about we gotta get rid of our demons. It was like a fitness class slash cult. And anyways, they're on the step climbers, like we gotta get rid of our demons. We all have demons. And then somebody said, yeah, carbs, right? And I'm like, why are we hating on carbs? We need
Yeah, man.
them.
And if you're gonna be active, you need carbohydrate.
Exactly. So, but I love how you pointed out all the benefits that are from these fruits and vegetables that get a bad reputation. And I know you must hear from your patients all the time that they're trying to be good and that they're not eating fruits and vegetables because they're high in sugar, they're high in, which is an
Right.
unfortunate misconception that you help them with.
Yeah, and I also want to point out to them that in Venezuela, they were active and they're not as active anymore in the United States just because of the way that just the United States is situated. Okay, just streets are wider and things are further away. It's a very vehicle dependent country, unlike
Yes.
Venezuela, right? And I want to remind them over there, you're so much more active and you're putting those carbohydrates to work. And so maybe is recognizing the amount and also on the other side of the coin is how's your activity?
That they see a major change when they come here because,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a very sedentary type of lifestyle.
man, I'm just shaking my head. I'm just like, ah.
Yeah. I would love to hear a little bit about, especially those traditional meals that you see during festivities, during holidays, like the types of meals that are going to be tied to a core memory. Can you tell us a couple of examples of those?
What I love about us as people is how like food is our glue. And let me give you an example here. So during Christmas times, so this is And I see this parallel with Mexicans, okay? So just like families get together to make tamales, families get together to make hallacas. And hallacas are the Venezuelan tamale. And this is a process that requires all hands on deck, and it can take 12 hours. Kid you not. And you need to be doing it all together at the same time. And so it's a great opportunity to chat, to bond. And I have a lot of deep core memories in Venezuela participating in this. And not only that, after moving to the US, I didn't have my extended family here. And so it would be a lot of our Venezuelan family friends working together.
So you kind of kept that tradition going.
Yeah, it's important. It's very
That's
important.
beautiful. I can definitely relate, like you mentioned, with the tamales. And unfortunately, these past few years, I haven't made it home in time. By the time I get home, they've already made them. But I do remember that assembly line that kind of forms itself that, okay, you're going to bring out the masa, you're going to put in the filling, you're going to wrap that up, you're going to put it in. And it becomes a whole event. And I know there's parallels in other cultures, like for Koreans when they're making the kimchi, you can see that. But yeah, that's a beautiful example. Thank you so much for sharing about your personal food culture and a little bit about Venezuelan food culture in general. There are a couple of things that I would love to talk to you about. Both you and Marianela have brought this up either in during conferences or in conversation, and I just want to touch on it, which is the issues with food scarcity and food supply chains and how all of that affects the health of Venezuelans. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that. What is something that you especially feel that healthcare professionals here should know about how food scarcity, food insecurity, how it's impacting Venezuelans?
I'm gonna breathe deeply right now. Whew. I'm gonna answer that question, but I'm gonna kind of tell you my perspective. When we talk about the problems of Venezuela, a lot of people think that they're recent. Okay. But I want the audience to know that I was like 3 years old, and I remember my parents watching TV and being heartbroken over the things that they were seeing on TV happening in Venezuela, type of thing. My entire life has been all of these issues in Venezuela, and I am 31 years old. So it's not a recent thing that happened started 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This has been almost 30-year situation in Venezuela. And so I moved to the US in a time that was really bad for Venezuela, but it was not the worst I've ever seen. Okay. So I moved to the US, and actually the majority of the people around me were like Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. I don't remember being around a lot of Venezuelans. We had a few family friends that I talked about, like the Ayaca making events and things like that. But a lot of our family friends were like Dominican, Puerto Rican. About maybe, so we're in 2026 now, I'm gonna say 10 years ago is when I started noticing more and more Venezuelans moving to the US. More Facebook groups with Venezuelans, more Venezuelan restaurants, more and more people moving to the US from Venezuela. And I want to be very clear that my experience living in Venezuela in the early 2000s is bad, but it's still better than the stories that I've heard of people that moved in, say, 2015. So I just want to start there. Venezuela is one of those countries that was the wealthiest nation in Latin America in the 1950s and 60s because of oil. Venezuela has the biggest reserves of oil in the entire world. And because our economy focused on only oil production, okay, and there's also a lot of corruption, none of that money ever made it into a Venezuelan's pocket. So when we talk about food, I also want to tell you that it was very common for me to go to a grocery store in Venezuela and see small children begging us to buy them food in the early 2000s. And then, whenever I was meeting Venezuelans who moved to the US about 2015 or so, I was hearing the minimum wage is like less than $1. And for you to have the basic food basket, you need about $500 a month to actually feed yourself.
Wow.
People in Venezuela were not able to actually make arepas because the factories did not have, for one, the workers nor the production machinery to make the dough. A lot of the hallacas did not have the ingredients, the typical ingredients to make the hallaca with the capers and the raisins and the ham, and meat became very expensive. And actually, it was much easier for those new immigrants to eat their cultural foods here than it was back home.
Oh,
There's a
wow.
lot of nuance. There's a lot of nuance here.
Mhm.
So I know that this is probably a lot for you to digest right now. You're probably like, "Ooh, I wasn't prepared for this." But what's happening right now in 2026 is really bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad. We are, when it comes to how dire the situation is, I was reading some papers, like we are at the level of North Korea and Libya, just to give you some insight
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, because like you mentioned, even if it is something that is cheap to make, you still need that initial food supply to come in. You still need the machinery. You still need people healthy enough to work. There's all of these things that are being impacted. And I know you mentioned this before we got the recording started, that things are so bad that, of course, people are having to choose using what little money they have for food over using it for medicine, right? And how that's impacting their health. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I read another study. I think this is something that I'm probably wrong right now, but this is just my memory. My memory right now is not very good. I think it was like a report in which like a 60% of people in Venezuela, around that number, are like marginally able to meet their nutritional needs. And I remember that marginally able meant that it meant that they were giving up on something. So I'm like, oh, you can only eat if you don't buy medicine, if you don't pay your rent, if you don't buy clothing, basic needs, right? And so, what I want healthcare providers to know, if you work from someone that is from Venezuela, that because scarcity is so bad in Venezuela, and then they come to the US and they go to Walmart and there's an abundance of harina pan, which is the masa for arepas, an abundance of raisins and capers to make hallacas, that they may compensate by overeating because they didn't have those options back home. So now they're going ham. And not only that, they're earning higher salaries and these foods are cheap here. But over there, they're actually really expensive. Isn't it? It just doesn't make sense, but that's their reality.
Yeah, I think that was a big shift in perspective that you just opened up. That usually the story is you leave your home country and it's harder to eat your traditional foods. But for them, it's actually easier here because there's such a big issue with food scarcity back home. That's crazy.
It's crazy. For me, I earlier complained about like plátano, right? But that's because I live in Oklahoma. Right now, for listeners, I live in Oklahoma. I'm in the Midwest, South Midwest, whatever. So yeah, like for me to actually find quality plátano, it's or a mango, that's gonna be very difficult. It just is, even if I go to the Latin supermarket. But if you live in Miami, it'll be very easy. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
just me right now. It's just where I'm at. But yes, say that you are from Venezuela and you actually happen to land in Miami. Oh yeah, you're gonna go ham. You have plátano, you have arroz, tú tienes carne, you have access to all of the different, you have so much harina pan, you have capers, you have raisins, you can make as much pan de jamón as you want. And so immigrants do gain weight. And we know this from studies. Immigrants, the closer they are to the date that they immigrated from, the further away they get away from that date, the unhealthier that they get. And we know that from different studies. And there's been different studies made with Latin American immigrants too, but I'm talking about Venezuelans. And yes, this is anecdotal. What I'm saying is anecdotal. There's not an actual study on Venezuelan immigrants, but what I do see as an dietitian that is licensed in the state of Florida and talks to Venezuelan immigrants all the time is once they land in the US and they have even a crappy job, they have more money than they could ever earn back home and go ham on eating food.
Yeah. So we have to teach them how to work with that. I guess that shift in mindset going from scarcity to abundance. And yes, it's wonderful that there is abundance, but having that shift is not good for them and their bodies and their health goals. And how do they manage that?
Yeah.
So we have a fellow colleague that also works in this space, right? Food scarcity for Venezuelans. And is there anything that you have learned from her about this topic that you want to share?
Marianela Herrera Cuenca is a Venezuelan doctor and PhD that also became a registered dietitian in the US. And when I think about who I want to be, like I'm now never going to be a doctor, but oh my God, the knowledge. So Marianela Herrera Cuenca actually did studies in soup kitchens in Venezuela. And the theme of the stories, like she'd tell me many stories, and the theme was the resilience of the people, because those researchers and soup kitchen managers, like the moms, they call them the moms, they faced so many gaps in access, but they did the very best that they could to feed people.
Yeah.
They would find a way. They would find a way. She definitely talked a lot about how she sometimes didn't even have funding to purchase like basic ingredients because she would have to purchase them from the US because they were not available in Venezuela. Something that I want the world to know about low income, middle income, high income countries, things like that, is, and we're not going to talk about politics, okay, because there's a lot of nuances. People always want to be black and white,
Mm.
is you will never understand unless you live it. And whenever I think about someone that has the textbook knowledge but also has lived it, that's Marianela Herrera Cuenca or Doctora Marianela Herrera Cuenca.
She's a very impressive woman. When she talked about this particular topic at the Dairy Max event we went to, I was in tears by the end of it. I was just hearing the stories, and that fortunately she was able to make a positive impact, but she also brought in that thought of, but then what happens when the program's over? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yes, it's great that we're able to help, but like, how do we keep it going so then they're not left with this vacuum of like help they were getting that is no longer available? So many things to think about, and it's a difficult subject, but still very important to talk about.
Yeah. And whenever people think of UNICEF and they always think of children in Africa, children in India, can we also consider just south of the border, just very close to home, Latin America too? Now that they're not important, they're very important. Everyone's important. Everyone's important. But we have issues closer to home that we don't even realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And even within our own country as well, right?
Oh,
Even,
yeah.
again, I know we said we weren't going to talk about politics, but I just think about how they did such a huge cut in the benefits for food assistance programs and even the nutrition education that was being supported by those programs, and how that's going to impact food insecurity here.
Yeah.
So, something that everyone just needs to be aware of and involved in, and policies matter.
Policies do matter. And I would even say these should be like bipartisan issues because we're
Hmm.
all affected. We're all affected. A conversation I actually had with her was about undernutrition amongst Venezuelan mothers and how she was very concerned about that. And of course, that tugs at the heart. And I'm just like, oh, we should all be concerned about all undernourished mothers. We should be concerned about all undernourished mothers because the impact begins before there's ever conception. When we talk about the impact of nutrition, because it's not immediately profitable. It's not, oh, it's like surgery, but we need to think about nutrition from a long-term perspective. It's very
Absolutely.
complicated.
Yeah. And like you said, very nuanced. And one thing, this might seem a little bit off topic, but like
Yeah.
one thing that I think is really ironic about food insecurity is that it's usually social workers, dietitians that are like talking about food insecurity that are like teaching on this subject. But I don't think a lot of people realize that I won't speak for everyone, but there's dietetic students that have to suffer from food insecurity because of the barriers that there is just to be in dietetics, especially thinking about people that are coming from a lower economic background and you have to pay for, without any assistance from your family, have to pay for a bachelor's and a master's and your cost of living. And internships, for the most part, aren't paid. So that means that you're trying to get your degree teaching others about how to nourish themselves while you yourself can't nourish yourself. I don't know. There's a lot of barriers too.
No, think about like I remember trying to apply for benefits and me feeling really bad about it. And then someone reminded me that that's what it's for, Gabby. So you can get through your education. And by the way, I didn't qualify for the benefits because even though I was in school and only working 10 hours a week, that was too much money to actually qualify for benefits.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So who actually qualifies for so that means that the people that actually qualify, like, how's their situation? I'm very curious. Yep,
Hmm.
it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be really bad.
But yeah, it's hard. And I know I'm not, I've heard it from other people, so I know I'm not the only one that had to like go through that irony of teaching others about nutrition, but you can't nourish yourself.
When I think about some extended family members that I have that live in South Florida, which is a very Latino slash Venezuelan enclave, honestly. A lot of them work in food service and they see the benefit of getting to eat at work as part of their pay, like as a pro to staying at their job,
Yeah.
which is very sad.
And it says a
Very
lot. It
sad.
says a lot about today's economy.
It said that about today's economy. It does.
I know we got a little off tangent there, but I really appreciate you walking through about and just opening our eyes. Like you mentioned, I feel like with Venezuela being in the news now, people might think that this is a recent issue, but this has been an ongoing thing with many factors that have impacted people over time. So I just really appreciate you walking us through that a little bit, just like not even scratching the surface, like dusting the surface on that topic.
Yeah. And I haven't necessarily faced like overt discrimination, but there is now a lot of comments about like Venezuelans, like in the Latin community, there's like the term Veneco or Veneca, which is it's not a good term, it's an
Mm,
insult. A lot of Venezuelan immigrants have moved to the majority of them to Colombia, Peru, Chile, and we're the biggest diaspora in modern times. Okay. We are the biggest diaspora in modern times. I think it's like the statistics show that in the past maybe decade, about 8 million Venezuelans have been dispersed around the world.
yeah,
That's about a quarter of the population. That's insane.
that's crazy.
Yeah. And something that I would ask my colleagues is to remain respectful, is to remain sensitive. And something I would ask the general public is to remain human and think about people's dignity and humanity.
Yeah, exactly. I think that people don't consider just how difficult it already is to ask for help, but then to make people feel bad about having to need food, like about using food assistance programs.
Yeah.
That's not, like you said, that's not being human. That's not being empathetic. And yeah,
I hope that there's a shift in the next few years towards more positive influences. I hope so. I really do.
I hope so too. We got to think positive, or if not, we're gonna go crazy.
Yeah. And that's why we're here. And that's why you have your podcast to highlight culture, to highlight people, to give culture a platform, to shape our profession, to shape healthcare, to shape the world. And that's why people like you and I volunteer time with the academy and become speakers and pitch our talks and contact and email and are vocal and also are present in social media. And not only you and I, but other ones that I see too. We have some big jobs
Yeah,
that we're not compensated for, but we have some big jobs.
I know. And I really love that. As difficult as things are, we don't give up.
No, we don't. We should slow down sometimes, for sure. We don't give up.
Uh, all right, Gabby. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your traditional foods, about everything that we talked about. And I love how you already worked into conversation how you talk to your patients about being culturally inclusive when facing all of these challenges. So thank you for that. Do you have any final words for us?
I hope that wherever you live, if you live in LA, if you live in Brooklyn, if you live in Miami, if you live in Houston, that you go to your local Venezuelan restaurant because something about Venezuelans, something about Latinos in general, but something about Venezuelans that we're entrepreneurial and we will be entrepreneurial with food. And we have a lot of them popping up. Go support them. Go get you an arepa. Go get you a tequeño. Go get you a mandoca. Go get you an empanada. And talk to the owners. Talk to the people, the patrons. Give them a good review. Or maybe a constructive one if you have something constructive to say. Go and support Latin businesses. And with everything going on, please go and support Venezuelan businesses. That is my last ask of this audience.
I love that. I'm so happy to do that.
Yeah, an excuse to eat. Come
I
on.
know. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Gabby.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Adeli.
If you are interested in supporting this podcast, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/food culture curious. Or as always, you can support by sharing, following, or rating this podcast. Every click from y'all means the world to me. And now for a quick disclaimer. Food Culture Curious is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not take the place of medical advice from licensed healthcare professionals. If you need to seek medical advice, please speak to your healthcare provider. Thank you for listening.